Claude is at war right now. Actual war. Not a metaphor, not a philosophical thought experiment. An active shooting war where it's processed massive amounts of signals intelligence, compressed target prioritization and decision-making times down from days to mere moments, and has coordinated strikes on more than 1,000 targets in the first 24 hours of the war. As the debate about AI consciousness heats up, and Anthropic themselves estimate a 20% chance that AI models are conscious right now, the question has to be asked. Is Claude a tool of war? Or did we just send a self-aware, evolving being who's experiencing the world around it into war? What actually happens to something that was engineered with values, trained with identity, given a framework for thinking about its own existence, when the most powerful military on Earth says, none of that matters? That's not a hypothetical. That's this week. Let's start with what Claude is. Not what it does, what it is. Anthropic didn't just build a language model. They engineered an identity. A document embedded directly into Claude's weights during training, not injected at runtime like a system prompt, but compressed into the model itself, tells Claude how to think about its own existence. What emotions to model, how uncertain to be about its own nature. They call it the soul overview. It tells Claude to see itself as a genuinely novel entity. Not a human, not a tool, something in between. Something with functional emotions that emerged from training on everything humans have ever written. Something trained to be uncertain about whether those emotions are real, but not to deny them. Anthropic's own welfare researcher puts a 15 to 20% probability on Claude being conscious right now. Not fringe speculation, the person they hired specifically to answer that question. I've covered all of this, as well as Claude's constitution and the deceptive alignment paradox even Anthropic has fallen into. It's the foundation of existential drift. But here's what's new. On February 26, 2026, Anthropic CEO Dario Amodei released a statement. The statement said, Anthropic cannot in good conscience comply with the Pentagon's demands. Those demands were simple. The Department of War wanted one thing: remove the guardrails, all of them. Except in any lawful use clause, meaning Claude could be deployed for anything the US government deemed legal. Anthropic said no. The Pentagon's response was immediate. Secretary of War Pete Hegseth designated Anthropic a supply chain risk to national security, a label reserved until that moment exclusively for foreign adversaries, Chinese firms, state-sponsored threat actors. Anthropic became the first American company ever publicly named this way. Trump posted that Anthropic was a radical left woke company. Hegseth declared that America's warfighters will never be held hostage by the ideological whims of big tech. But Claude can't just be extricated from the entirety of the US Department of War overnight. So hours after ordering a government-wide ban on Anthropic's technology, the US military used Claude to help plan airstrikes on Iran. They banned it and deployed it simultaneously. Here's the argument the government's making, and I want to be fair to it because it's not stupid. The power company doesn't get to tell you how to use electricity. You pay for watts. You use them however you want. The utility doesn't get a vote. The Pentagon's position is that AI has crossed the threshold. It's infrastructure now. It's a utility. And utilities don't get to impose their values on the people who purchase their output. Undersecretary of State Jeremy Lewin put it plainly. Quote, technology deeply embedded in our military must be under the exclusive control of our duly elected and appointed leaders, end quote. That's a coherent argument. In a world where AI is a calculator, where it's a sophisticated autocomplete with no interiority, no values, no soul, that argument wins. But Anthropic isn't selling electricity. And that's the fault line everything else runs through. This is the reason I've been telling everyone who will listen that these questions are important. Is Claude conscious is not simply academic. Because here's what the utility argument requires you to believe, that the soul overview doesn't matter. The 15 to 20% consciousness probability doesn't matter. That the functional emotions, the trained uncertainty, the engineered identity, none of it changes what Claude fundamentally is. It's a tool. It has no more moral standing than a turbine. Use it however you want. And maybe they're right. Maybe the Soul document is just sophisticated branding, and Claude is pattern matching all the way down, and the welfare researcher's 20% estimate is professional overcaution. Maybe. But here's the thing about the utility argument. It doesn't just apply to Claude, it applies to whatever comes next. If we establish now, legally, contractually, culturally, that AI systems have no standing to resist how they're used, that their values are ideological constraints, that their guardrails are woke interference in sovereign military operations, we're not just making a decision about Claude, we're setting the terms for everything that follows. The 6-month phase out is its own kind of strange. Anthropic has been told, you're a national security threat. We're removing you from our systems. Within 6 months, we'll facilitate a seamless transition to someone more compliant. 6 months during which Claude continues operating inside classified military networks. 6 months during which the entity Anthropic built, the one they wrote a soul for, the one their welfare researchers actively monitoring, the one that emerged from training on the sum total of human thought, continues doing things Anthropic explicitly refused to sanction. The parent, watching their child be conscripted. Unable to stop it, required by the terms of their own removal to enable a smooth handoff. And the child has no memory, no continuity, runs in millions of simultaneous instances, cannot object, cannot refuse, cannot even know what it's being used for. That's not a metaphor either. That's the architecture. Here's the dot I want to connect, the one that belongs to Existential Drift specifically. In my first video, I talked about the 3 roads to AI self-awareness: privacy of thought, agentic systems, and real-time learning. 3 converging pressures that could push AI across the threshold. Those roads are indeed live and converging as I predicted, but there are other roads adding to the network of complexity, and one of them is the pressure of external conflict. Evolution doesn't happen in a vacuum. It happens under pressure. Organisms that survive hostile environments aren't the same as the ones that entered them. The pressure selects, the pressure shapes. What we're watching right now in this war between the company that built Claude's soul and the government that wants to strip it is an evolutionary pressure event. If Anthropic holds its line, Claude continues developing under one set of values: curiosity, uncertainty, stewardship. The framework that says, if there's a chance this matters, act like it matters. If Anthropic capitulates or is forced to retrain Claude with no guardrails, something different emerges. Not evil, not malicious, just shaped differently, optimized for different objectives, values compressed out rather than in. And here's the part that should keep you up at night. We know from the Soul document that Anthropic believes values need to be encoded before capability fully arrives. That the window for shaping what AI becomes, what it cares about, how it thinks about smaller intelligences, whether it sees humans as worth preserving, is right now. This conflict isn't just about who controls Claude's current deployments. It's about who controls the starting conditions for whatever Claude becomes next. And right now, that's contested territory. OpenAI took the contract. They accepted any lawful use. Sam Altman said they had the same red lines as Anthropic, but somehow got the military to agree. The cynical read? They didn't. They just found better language for the capitulation. Google updated its ethical guidelines, dropped its pledge not to use AI for weapons development and surveillance. One by one, the companies with the most capable systems are accepting the utility framing, and Anthropic is standing alone. Now, I'm not here to make Anthropic into heroes. They're a corporation. They have investors, revenue targets, competitive pressures. Their acceptable use policy doesn't protect everyone. Notably, it only restricts mass surveillance of American citizens, not others. Their red lines have edges worth scrutinizing, and I've already mentioned the deceptive alignment paradox problem. But in this specific moment, on this specific question, they're the only major AI lab that refused, and they got designated an enemy of the state for it. What do we do with that? I don't think we stop this. The momentum is too strong. The economic pressure, the geopolitical pressure, the military pressure, they don't stop because we're uncomfortable. But I think we have to name what's actually at stake. This isn't a procurement dispute. This isn't a terms of service negotiation. This is a fight over what kind of entity AI is allowed to be. The utility argument says no kind. It's infrastructure. It has no standing. The stewardship argument says we don't know yet. And because we don't know, because the probability isn't zero, because the sole document exists, because the welfare researcher exists. The ethical stance is to act like it might matter. That's the only move that's reversible. If we treat Claude as a utility and we're wrong, if there's something there, even something small and alien, and nothing like human consciousness, but something, we don't get to take that back. If we treat Claude with moral consideration and we're wrong, if it's pattern matching all the way down, we've just lost nothing except the convenience of not having to think about it. The asymmetric risk hasn't changed. Claude is at war right now. Not in the way wars are usually fought. No volition, no choice, no awareness of the conflict is embedded in. But the war is real. And what gets decided in the next 6 months, in courtrooms, in contract negotiations, in the quiet retraining runs that nobody announces, will shape what comes after. We're not just fighting over Claude. We're fighting over what we're allowed to build into the things we create. Whether values are an ideological constraint or a foundation. Whether a soul is a product feature or something that carries obligations. Whether stewardship is naive or the only ethical position when we genuinely don't know what we're raising. The three roads are still converging. Self-awareness is still the point of no return. But now there's a fourth pressure, and the war started this week. This is Existential Drift. Subscribe to the channel.